History books are not finished stories, but living documents waiting for a new chapter to be unearthed. The ground beneath our feet holds secrets that have repeatedly shattered our understanding of our own past. This journey explores 30 archaeological discoveries that forced experts to tear up old narratives and write entirely new ones. You will see how a single artifact can overturn centuries of belief and redefine ancient civilizations. How did a child's exclamation in a cave change our view of human creativity, and what sunken city proved a legend was real? By the end, your perception of history will be fundamentally altered. What part of the past do you think is most vulnerable to being rewritten? Next, the discovery of the Rosetta Stone was a monumental event, but it was the subsequent decades of relentless effort that truly changed the world. A young French scholar named Jean-François Champollion became obsessed with this ancient puzzle. While others struggled, he dedicated his life to comparing the three scripts, letter by letter, symbol by symbol. His breakthrough came when he realized the hieroglyphs were not merely pictorial, but a sophisticated combination of sound-based signs and conceptual images. The moment of understanding was reportedly so overwhelming he collapsed, shouting, "I have it," before falling into a feverish state for days. His work did not just provide a simple translation, it resurrected an entire civilization from silence. Suddenly, the voices of pharaohs, priests, and everyday people carved on temple walls and papyrus scrolls could be heard again. We could finally read their prayers, their laws, and their poetry. This single slab of granite transformed Egyptology from a field of speculation into a rigorous historical science, proving that no language is ever truly lost if you possess the key to unlock it. The quiet sound of shattering pottery in a desert cave echoed far louder than any explosion. A young Bedouin shepherd, searching for a lost goat in 1947, threw a stone into a dark opening and was answered by that unexpected clink. What he found inside were not treasures of gold or silver, but something infinitely more valuable to history, carefully stored in clay jars. These were the first of the Dead Sea Scrolls, a vast library hidden away for 2 millennia. The dry, stable climate of the Qumran caves had acted as a perfect time capsule, preserving hundreds of parchment and papyrus scrolls. They dated from as early as the 3rd century before Christ to the 1st century after, a span covering a profoundly formative period. Among them were copies of biblical books like Isaiah, 1,000 years older than any Hebrew version known to modern scholars. Just holding one of these texts was like touching a direct line to the ancient world. But the scrolls were far more than just old Bibles. They contained rule books for a secluded religious community, passionate hymns of praise, and fiery commentaries predicting an epic final battle between the forces of light and darkness. This collection revealed a religious landscape buzzing with debate and diverse interpretations, a far cry from the monolithic picture many had assumed for the era. It showed that the text of the Hebrew Bible was not a single, fixed entity passed down perfectly through the ages, but a living tradition with fascinating variations. Scholars were forced to confront a more complex and human story of how these sacred texts were copied, edited, and cherished. The desert had safeguarded a chorus of voices, proving that even the most fragile written word can outlast empires, patiently waiting in the dark to share its secrets. That belief in an empty, plundered valley was about to be shattered. For years, archaeologist Howard Carter had scoured the Valley of the Kings, driven by a near-obsessive conviction that one tomb remained. His patron, Lord Carnarvon, was on the verge of withdrawing funding after yet another fruitless season. Then, in November of 1922, a water boy stumbled on a stone step cut into the rock. It was the top of a staircase leading down to a sealed doorway. Carter wired Carnarvon with the electrifying news. When the noblemen arrived, they cleared the debris, and Carter made a small breach in the second sealed doorway. He held a candle to the hole, his eyes straining in the dim light. "What is it?" Carnarvon asked impatiently. "Can you see anything?" Carter could only manage a breathless reply. "Yes, wonderful things." The air that escaped from that chamber had been locked away for over 3,000 years. As their eyes adjusted, they saw a glimpse of the impossible. The flickering candlelight reflected off the gleam of gold and the sheen of ivory. Everywhere they looked, objects of incredible artistry were piled high, a chaotic jumble of royal splendor. This was only the antechamber. It would take years to fully catalogue and remove the more than 5,000 artifacts that filled the 4 rooms. They found golden chariots disassembled for the journey to the afterlife, ornate couches carved as sacred animals, and a throne of brilliant gold whose back showed the young king being anointed by his wife in an intimate, tender scene. But the true moment of awe came when they finally reached the burial chamber and peered inside the outermost of 3 golden shrines. There, staring back across the centuries, was the solid gold portrait mask of Tutankhamun, a masterpiece of serene and youthful beauty that has become the very face of ancient Egypt. This was not merely a collection of treasure, it was a complete and functioning royal household prepared for eternity. The tomb contained everything the boy king would need, from weapons and linens to food and wine. It provided an unparalleled, 3-dimensional blueprint of New Kingdom royal life, religion, and funerary practice. The discovery transformed a historically insignificant pharaoh who died young into a global icon. And it posed a staggering question for historians. If this was the tomb of a minor ruler, what unimaginable riches must have filled the tombs of legendary pharaohs like Ramesses the Great, tombs that were looted long ago. The gold of Tutankhamun was not just a measure of wealth, it was a haunting echo of all that has been lost, a silent challenge that whispers from the dust, urging us to wonder what other wonders might still lie hidden, waiting for another candle to be held to the darkness. While the deserts of Egypt were giving up their royal secrets, an entirely different kind of army was waiting in the dark earth of China. In the spring of 1974, a group of farmers digging a well outside the city of Xi'an made a startling find. Their shovels did not strike water, but instead hit the hardened clay head of a life-sized soldier, his stoic face staring back from the soil after more than 2,000 years. This single, unassuming figure was the first sentinel of one of the most breathtaking archaeological discoveries of all time, the Terracotta Army. They had accidentally uncovered the outer perimeter of the tomb complex of Qin Shi Huang, the formidable and ambitious ruler who first unified China into a single empire. The scale of what lay beneath was almost beyond comprehension. As excavations began, a vast pit was revealed, filled with thousands of these silent warriors standing in precise military formation. This was not a symbolic representation, it was a complete, battle-ready force. Rows upon rows of infantrymen stood shoulder to shoulder with armored officers. Kneeling archers were poised to loose their arrows, while charioteers held the reins of terracotta horses, each animal sculpted with powerful, muscular detail. The sheer logistical effort was staggering. Historians had known the Qin dynasty was powerful, but this army of clay proved its organizational capabilities were on a level no one had fully grasped. It spoke of an emperor who could command the labor of hundreds of thousands of artisans and laborers for decades, all in service of his afterlife. But the true wonder lies in the details. As you walk along the excavated pits today, you do not see a monotonous, identical legion. You are looking at individuals, every single soldier possesses unique facial features, from the set of their eyes to the curve of their lips. Their hairstyles are tied in distinct fashions, and the patterns on their armor and clothing vary according to their rank and role. This was not an anonymous, mass-produced product. It was a vast gallery of portraiture, each figure hand-sculpted with a startling humanity. They were also fully armed with real, functional weapons, crossbows with intricate bronze trigger mechanisms and swords still sharp enough to draw blood, many coated with a protective chromium layer that preserved them through the centuries. This silent, underground garrison forced a complete rewrite of our understanding of the Qin dynasty. It was not merely a brutally efficient, short-lived regime, but a civilization of astonishing artistic vision and engineering genius. The army was just the beginning, a protective force for the main event, the emperor's tomb itself, which ancient texts describe as a miniature universe with pearl stars on the ceiling and rivers of flowing mercury. That central mound remains largely unexcavated, a final secret held tightly by China's first emperor. What other wonders, what further armies of artisans and court officials might still be waiting in the dark, guarding a ruler who believed his power could extend even beyond death? A world of stone and silence fell from the sky in a single, terrible day. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in the year 79 was a cataclysm that entombed the bustling Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum under a deep blanket of volcanic ash and superheated gas. For the people who lived there, it was an unimaginable horror. For history, it created a perfect, if heartbreaking, time capsule. Unlike the grand tombs of kings, these were not places prepared for eternity. They were simply living cities interrupted. When systematic excavations began centuries later, archaeologists did not just find ruins, they found a preserved moment. They uncovered loaves of bread still in the oven, jars of wine and oil, and coins left on a shop counter. The most haunting finds were the voids in the hardened ash, spaces left by decomposed bodies. By carefully filling these voids with plaster, they created casts of the victims exactly as they fell, capturing their final postures of despair and resignation with a chilling intimacy. Here was a wealthy man clutching his purse, a slave still wearing an iron ankle ring, and a family huddled together. These were not statues, they were the final moments of real people, a stark reminder that the grand sweep of history is built upon countless individual stories. The preserved buildings told an equally vivid story. Vibrant wall paintings depicted myths and landscapes, while casual graffiti scratched onto walls revealed political opinions, personal boasts, and simple messages between friends. In Herculaneum, the intense heat carbonized wooden furniture, baby cradles, and even food, preserving their exact shapes. This incredible level of detail demolished the old, top-down view of Roman history that relied almost entirely on the writings of elites like senators and emperors. Pompeii and Herculaneum gave voice to the everyday citizens, the bakers, the fish sauce makers, and the tavern keepers who formed the backbone of the empire. We could see how they decorated their homes, what they ate for dinner, and how they spent their money. This was not history told by the winners, it was history lived by the common people, frozen in ash and waiting for centuries to be heard. For centuries, the technological genius of the ancient Greeks was thought to reside in their philosophy and architecture, not in intricate machinery. This assumption was washed ashore from the bottom of the sea, encrusted in 2 millennia of corrosion. In 1901, sponge divers exploring a Roman-era shipwreck near the island of Antikythera recovered a lump of bronze and wood that seemed like just another piece of oxidized debris. It was set aside for years, a puzzling artifact with no clear purpose. Then, slowly, researchers began to notice something strange. Faint traces of gears were visible on the surface, hints of a complex internal structure. It was only with the advent of advanced X-ray and CT scanning technology decades later that the true marvel was revealed. This was not a simple statue or navigational tool. It was the Antikythera Mechanism, the world's oldest known analog computer. The device was a masterpiece of bronze gearwork, a complex clockwork of interlocking dials and pointers housed in a wooden case. Inscriptions on its face served as a detailed user's manual. Built around the 2nd century before Christ, this single machine could predict the movements of the sun and moon, forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and even track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. By turning a hand crank, an ancient user could see a miniature model of the cosmos operating right in front of them, calculating celestial events with a precision that would not be matched for over 1,000 years. It was a portable planetarium, an astronomical calculator, and a sacred calendar all in one. This one artifact single-handedly shattered the established timeline of human invention. We had always assumed such sophisticated mechanical knowledge did not emerge until the clockmakers of 18th century Europe. Yet here was proof that the ancient world had reached a pinnacle of engineering that simply vanished from history. The Antikythera Mechanism was not a magical, one-off creation. Its flawless design and precise machining speak to a rich tradition of gearwork, a school of mechanics and craftsmen whose other works were likely lost to time, melted down for their bronze or left to rust. It forces us to confront a haunting possibility. How much of ancient science and technology has simply disappeared, leaving behind only ghostly echoes like this one, salvaged from a sunken ship? This corroded clockwork is more than a relic. It is a profound challenge, a message in a bottle from a past far more advanced than we ever dreamed, urging us to reconsider everything we think we know about the march of progress. The ghost of a king sailed into history not on water but through earth. On the eve of the Second World War, in the peaceful grounds of a Suffolk estate, archaeologists uncovered something that defied expectation. It was not the rotting timbers of a ship, but its perfect negative image, a dark stain in the sand outlining a vessel 27 meters long. This majestic ship had been dragged from the river, buried in a mound, and transformed into a royal tomb for a powerful Anglo-Saxon ruler, perhaps King Redwald of East Anglia. Inside that central chamber lay a king's ransom, a collection of goods so opulent it instantly rewrote the history of an entire era. The centerpiece was a helmet of breathtaking artistry, a face mask of iron sheathed in gold and inlaid with gleaming garnets, creating the visage of a fierce, winged creature. It was more than armor, it was a crown and a totem of power. Alongside it lay ceremonial weapons, a heavy gold belt buckle intricately worked with interlacing beasts, and a shield of wood and leather with a magnificent gold boss. But perhaps the most telling finds were those that spoke of a world far beyond the English shores. There was silver tableware stamped with the mark of the Byzantine emperor in Constantinople, and a set of lavish silver bowls for feasting. These objects were not local imitations, they were imports, gifts, or tribute from the greatest empire of the age. This single burial mound shattered the long-held concept of the Dark Ages in Britain. Historians had pictured this period as a time of cultural collapse and isolation after the Romans left, a backward era of warring tribes, Sutton who screamed a different truth. Here was evidence of a society with master craftsmen capable of work that rivals any in Europe, led by a king wealthy and connected enough to acquire treasures from across the known world. This was not an isolated backwater, it was a sophisticated and powerful kingdom, a node in a vast international network of trade and diplomacy. The ghost ship proved that even in periods where written records are silent, the ground can speak volumes, telling stories of splendor, connection, and a lost world of warrior kings whose legacies were written not on parchment, but in gold and garnet. Hidden in the Andean clouds, a city of stone defied both conquest and time. For centuries, Machu Picchu slept in silence, its terraces and temples clinging to a razor-backed mountain ridge 2,400 meters above sea level. It was not a trained archaeologist who finally brought it to the world's attention, but a determined historian, Hiram Bingham, led by local farmers in 1911. They guided him up a near-vertical slope through dense jungle, and there, shrouded in vines and mist, lay a sight that took his breath away. A sprawling complex of perfectly cut granite walls, staircases that seemed to ascend into the sky, and ceremonial structures aligned with the sun. The Spanish conquistadors who toppled the Inca Empire in the 16th century had never found this place. It was never looted, never desecrated, remaining almost exactly as its inhabitants left it. This was not a ruin in the traditional sense. It was a perfectly preserved time capsule of Inca genius. The engineering is almost beyond belief. Without the wheel, without iron tools, and without mortar, Inca stonemasons carved and fitted massive blocks of stone so precisely that you cannot slip a piece of paper between them. This precise interlocking, known as ashlar masonry, allowed the structures to dance with the mountain during earthquakes, settling and then settling back into place without collapsing. They terraced the entire mountainside, not only to create flat land for agriculture, but to prevent the steep slopes from eroding away, a feat of environmental management that feels strikingly modern. But what was this city in the clouds? Was it a royal retreat for the Emperor Pachacuti, a secluded estate far from the capital of Cusco? Was it a sacred religious site, a home for the virgins of the sun, or an astronomical observatory designed to track the solstices? The Intihuatana stone, an intricately carved ritual stone that translates as the hitching post of the sun, suggests a deep celestial connection. The truth is, we still do not know for certain, and that mystery is part of its power. The discovery of Machu Picchu forced historians to completely rethink the Inca civilization. It proved their influence and ambition stretched far beyond their known capital, deep into the most inaccessible and sacred reaches of the Andes. This was not a people merely surviving in a harsh environment. They were mastering it, reshaping entire mountains into works of art and spiritual significance. It stands as a haunting monument to a civilization whose greatest achievements were hidden from its conquerors, a silent city that waited centuries to reveal its story, challenging us to wonder what other magnificent creations of lost cultures still lie shrouded in the world's remote jungles and mountains, waiting for their guide. A child's innocent gaze saw what learned men refused to believe, while her father, Marcelino Sanz de Sochuola, methodically searched the floor of a cave on their Spanish property for bones and tools in 1879. His young daughter Maria grew bored and looked up. In the flickering torchlight, her eyes widened at the sight of immense, powerful beasts painted across the rocky ceiling. "Look, Papa, bulls," she exclaimed. What she had discovered were not simple sketches, but a monumental gallery of prehistoric art. The ceiling of the cave of Altamira was a riot of color and life, covered in magnificent paintings of bison, deer, and wild boar. These animals were rendered with a stunning realism and vitality that seemed impossible for such an ancient time. The artists had used the natural contours of the rock to give their subjects a startling three-dimensional volume, and the pigments of red ochre and black manganese were so fresh and vibrant they appeared to have been painted yesterday. When Sochuola published his findings, claiming these masterpieces were the work of Stone Age people, he was met with scorn and outright ridicule. The scientific establishment of the day was unanimous. The art was too sophisticated, too beautifully preserved. It had to be a modern forgery. Experts accused Sochuola of hiring a contemporary artist to paint the ceiling, a humiliation that clung to him until his death. The truth, however, was patiently waiting in the dark, as more caves with similar art were discovered across France and Spain, and as scientific dating methods improved, the authenticity of Altamira became undeniable. The paintings were over 14,000 years old, created by Cro-Magnon humans during the Upper Paleolithic period. This validation forced a seismic shift in how we view our ancient ancestors. The idea of prehistoric humans as grunting, primitive brutes, concerned only with survival, was instantly demolished. Here was undeniable proof of complex symbolic thought, deep observation of the natural world, and a sophisticated artistic tradition passed down through generations. The artists of Altamira were not just recording their environment, they were capturing its spirit. The charging bison and grazing deer suggest a world rich with myth and ritual, where art was a powerful bridge between the human and animal realms. This single cave, first seen through the eyes of a little girl, rewrote the timeline of human cognitive and cultural evolution. It pushed back the dawn of advanced artistic ability by thousands of years, proving that the human impulse to create, to find beauty, and to leave a mark is as ancient as we are. The ceiling of Altamira was not just a canvas, it was the first chapter of our story, waiting for a child to read it aloud. Sometimes the most powerful lesson comes not from a genuine artifact, but from a brilliant fake. In the 1960s, Yale University unveiled a discovery that sent shockwaves through the historical world, the Vinland Map. This seemingly ancient parchment depicted the known world of the 15th century, but with one extraordinary addition. West of Greenland, it showed a clearly defined landmass labeled Vinland, the name given to North America in the Icelandic sagas. Here, apparently, was the smoking gun, a pre-Columbian map proving that Norse explorers like Leif Erikson had not only reached the New World but had charted it for European cartographers. It was a stunning validation of the Viking sagas, a document that would have rewritten the story of the discovery of America, placing a Norse map in European hands decades before Columbus ever set sail. The desire for it to be real was overwhelming. It fit a perfect, compelling narrative, but then the scientists began their work. The investigation into the map's ink became a detective story in its own right. Advanced analysis revealed that a key component of the ink, titanium dioxide, was in a form that was not commercially produced until the 1920s. The parchment, while genuinely old, appeared to have been carefully prepared to carry a modern forgery. The case against the map's authenticity grew steadily, with most experts now concluding it was an elaborate and cunning hoax created in the 20th century. Yet the saga of the Vinland Map is paradoxically one of our most important discoveries. It taught the field a harsh but necessary lesson about the seductive power of a good story. The intense desire to confirm a beloved historical tale, the story of the Vikings beating Columbus, created a blindness to the scientific evidence staring back from the lab reports. This single, controversial piece of parchment forced historians and archaeologists to grow up, to develop more rigorous, chemistry-based authentication methods that could not be swayed by a compelling narrative. It stands as a permanent monument to a crucial truth. Not every earth-shattering find actually shatters our understanding of the past. Some of the most profound discoveries instead shatter our methods, forcing us to become better, more skeptical, and more scientific in our pursuit of the truth. The Vinland Map did not rewrite history, but it forever rewrote the way we verify it. The quiet hills of southeastern Turkey held a secret that would unravel the very foundation of human history. For decades, the story was simple and logical. First, humans learned to farm, creating a stable food supply. This allowed them to build permanent villages which grew into towns. Then, with the surplus of food and labor, They had the time and resources to develop complex religion, social hierarchies, and finally, monumental architecture. It was a clean, progressive timeline. Then came Göbekli Tepe. Excavations beginning in the mid-1990s revealed a structure so ancient it seemed to belong to a different world. Built around 9600 before Christ, this site predates Stonehenge by a staggering 6,000 years. It is a series of circular enclosures, each defined by massive, T-shaped limestone pillars weighing many tons. These are not rough-hewn stones. They are masterfully carved, covered with intricate reliefs of foxes, scorpions, lions, and vultures, a menagerie of wild animals frozen in stone. The scale and skill required to quarry, transport, and erect these pillars is immense, the kind of project we associate with powerful pharaohs or emperors. But Göbekli Tepe was not built by a settled, agricultural society with a king and a surplus of grain. It was built by hunter-gatherers. This fact alone sent a tremor through the world of archaeology. The entire traditional narrative of the Neolithic Revolution was turned upside down. Here was proof that the human drive to create something monumental, to gather for a shared spiritual purpose, came first. The desire to worship may have been the initial spark. Imagine the scene. Small, nomadic bands of people living off the land came together season after season at this sacred spot. They coordinated their labor, pooling their knowledge and muscle to carve these incredible pillars from the bedrock and raise them towards the heavens. Such a project required organization, communication, and a shared belief system powerful enough to motivate the effort. To feed the workers gathered for these massive building projects, they may have started to cultivate the wild grasses growing on the surrounding hills. They needed a reliable, predictable food source that could support a large, temporary population. In this new light, agriculture was not the cause of complex society, but its consequence. The temple came before the farm, the ritual gathering before the village. Göbekli Tepe forces us to see our ancestors not as primitive beings solely focused on survival, but as visionaries who looked at a bare hill and saw a cathedral, who felt a compulsion to build the impossible, and in doing so, accidentally invented civilization itself. What other fundamental truths about our origins are still buried, waiting for a single shovelful of earth to reveal a story we never thought to tell? While the desert near the Dead Sea was yielding its ancient Hebrew scrolls, another Egyptian farmer, digging for a natural fertilizer called sebak in 1945, accidentally unearthed a different kind of spiritual treasure. His mattock struck not a pot of bones but a sealed ceramic jar near the cliffs of Nag Hammadi. Fearing a jinn or spirit, he almost left it untouched. But thoughts of gold overcame his fear, and he smashed the jar open. Inside were not coins, but 13 leather-bound books, papyrus codices carefully hidden away for 1600 years. This was the Nag Hammadi Library, and its contents would send shockwaves through the history of religion. These Coptic translations of even older Greek texts were not the familiar Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They were lost Gospels, alternative scriptures with names like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Secret Book of John. Scholars believe they were buried in the 4th century, as Orthodox Christianity was consolidating its power and declaring other texts heretical. A monk from a nearby monastery, fearing the ordered destruction of such writings, likely sealed them in the jar to preserve them for a future age, and what a vision of the past they preserved. These texts presented a Christianity that was profoundly mystical and philosophical, one where the path to salvation was not primarily through faith or sacrifice, but through a secret inner knowledge called gnosis. This was a direct personal revelation of the divine spark within oneself. In the Gospel of Thomas, for instance, Jesus is not the suffering savior of the cross, but a teacher of enigmatic wisdom sayings. The text begins, "These are the secret sayings that the living Jesus spoke." It presents a kingdom of God not as a future heavenly reward, but as a state of spiritual awareness available here and now, if only one possesses the knowledge to see it. The secret book of John offers a completely different creation story, a complex cosmology involving a supreme, invisible God and a flawed, arrogant creator known as the Demiurge who fashioned the imperfect material world. This was a radical departure from the singular, benevolent God of the emerging Orthodox tradition. Before this discovery, our understanding of early Christianity was like looking at a finished, edited novel. The Nag Hammadi library gave us the raw, unedited first drafts, revealing a tumultuous first few centuries that were not a single, unified movement, but a vibrant, chaotic marketplace of competing ideas. There were many Christianities, each with its own scriptures, its own understanding of Jesus, and its own path to enlightenment. The discovery forced a complete re-evaluation of Christian origins, proving that the faith we know today was not the only version, but simply the one that won a long and fierce theological battle. It reminds us that history is written by the victors, but sometimes the voices of the silenced are patiently waiting in the earth, ready to tell their side of the story. For generations, the giant stone heads of Rapa Nui have stared inland, silent witnesses to a story we thought we understood. We saw them as the tragic monuments of a people who chopped down their last tree, doomed by their own short-sightedness on a remote, treeless island. This narrative of ecological suicide was a powerful and simple cautionary tale. But the truth, as archaeologists have recently uncovered, is far more profound and far more human. The real story of Easter Island is not one of collapse but of breathtaking resilience. The first clue that our old story was wrong lay right beneath the surface. When teams began excavating around the iconic heads, they found something astonishing. These were not just heads. Each statue has a massive, full body, buried deep in the soil by centuries of erosion and accumulation. Some of these torsos are taller than the heads themselves, covered in intricate, previously unseen carvings. These petroglyphs, hidden from view for generations, depict crescent symbols representing the sacred canoe, a direct link to the seafaring heritage of the Rapa Nui people. This discovery alone transformed the moai from simple headstones into complete, powerful figures, each one a monumental project of faith and community. But the rewriting of history did not stop there. The popular myth insisted that the islanders recklessly deforested their home, leading to starvation and warfare. New archaeological evidence paints a completely different picture. Faced with a challenging environment, the Rapa Nui did not give up. They became ingenious agricultural engineers. They covered the island in a system of rock gardening, carefully breaking the volcanic bedrock into fragments to create fertile soil pockets. In these gardens, they cultivated sweet potatoes, their primary food source, with a sophistication that allowed a sustainable population to thrive for centuries. This was not a society blundering toward destruction. It was a culture brilliantly adapting to its limits. So what really happened? The true collapse came not from within, but from the outside. With the arrival of European explorers in the 18th century came the horrors of the slave trade, and most devastatingly, introduced diseases to which the islanders had no immunity. Their population was decimated, their social structure shattered by forces they could never have anticipated. The story we told ourselves about ecological suicide was a profound injustice, blaming the victim for a catastrophe they did not create. The silent moai, with their newly revealed bodies, stand as a testament not to failure, but to human ingenuity in the face of immense challenges, and to the cruel unpredictability of history. They force us to ask, how many other lost civilizations have we misunderstood? Our simple stories masking a far more complex and admirable truth. The story of the Celts was long told by their enemies, written by Greek and Roman historians who dismissed them as savage barbarians from the wild north. A single burial chamber, unearthed in a quiet French field in 2015, silenced those ancient voices forever. Near the village of Lavaux, archaeologists uncovered the tomb of a man they call the Celtic Prince, a chieftain from the 5th century before Christ. He was laid to rest in a great timber chamber placed upon the axle of his two-wheeled chariot, a symbol of his power and mobility, but the true measure of his status lay in the treasures surrounding him. The centerpiece was a massive bronze cauldron, a masterpiece of metalwork nearly a meter in diameter. Its 4 sturdy handles were decorated with the horned, bearded face of Aeolus, the Greek river god, a figure straight from the mythology of the Mediterranean. Inside this great vessel lay a finely crafted Greek wine jug, a beautiful Etruscan ceramic flask, and other objects for a lavish funerary feast. The prince himself was adorned with exquisite gold jewelry, including a heavy torque or neck ring of stunning artistry. Here was a man who drank Greek wine from a bronze cauldron adorned with Greek gods, while living in the heart of continental Europe. This was not the burial of a barbarian chieftain obsessed only with war. This was the tomb of a sophisticated leader who saw himself as part of a wider, cosmopolitan world. The Lavaux prince was a node in a vast pan-European trade network that stretched from the Hallstatt culture of Central Europe down to the bustling city-states of Greece and Etruria. He was not on the periphery of the civilized world. He was an active participant in it, a consumer of the finest luxury goods the classical world had to offer. His tomb provides undeniable physical proof that the flow of culture and commerce was not a one-way street from the Mediterranean outward. Ideas, art, and objects moved freely along these ancient routes, and a Celtic elite in modern-day France had the wealth, the taste, and the connections to acquire them. This single discovery forces us to scrap the old map of the ancient world, a map with a bright center and a dark periphery. In its place, we see a complex web of mutual influence, where a Celtic prince could command respect and acquire treasures from civilizations we once thought looked down upon him. What other powerful figures, now lost to history, were weaving similar connections across the ancient world, their stories still waiting beneath the soil? The intricate trade routes of the Bronze Age were not just lines on a map, but vital arteries pulsing with the lifeblood of empires. In 1982, a sponge diver named Mehmet Sakir, swimming off the coast of Uluburun in Turkey, spotted a strange, biscuit-like shape on the seafloor. This was not a rock, but the first of hundreds of copper ingots, part of a cargo that had rested in the silent, dark waters for over 3,000 years. The ship they came from was a merchant vessel that sank around 1300 before Christ, and its discovery offered a frozen snapshot of a world we had only ever read about in fragments. This was not a warship or a royal barge, but a working cargo ship, a time capsule from the height of late Bronze Age commerce. As archaeologists meticulously excavated the site, the sheer diversity of its cargo began to tell an astonishing story of global connection. The ship's hold was a miniature United Nations of the ancient world. There were 10 tons of Cypriot copper, the essential ingredient for bronze, stacked in their distinctive oxhide shapes. Right beside them were ingots of precious tin, likely from distant Afghanistan, the other necessary component for alloying bronze. This single shipment contained enough metal to equip a small army, revealing the staggering scale of the Bronze Age arms trade. But the ship carried far more than raw materials. There were beautiful Canaanite jewelry and glass ingots from the Levant, finely crafted Mycenaean pottery and swords from Greece, a golden scarab bearing the name of the Egyptian queen Nefertiti, and even African ebony and Baltic amber beads that had traveled thousands of miles from their source. This vessel was a floating emporium, its contents linking at least 7 major cultures across 3 continents. The Uluburan shipwreck provided the first undeniable physical proof that the great kingdoms of the era, the Hittites, the Egyptians, and the Mycenaeans, were not isolated powers. They were deeply, inextricably interdependent. Egypt needed that Cypriot copper and Afghan tin just as much as a Mycenaean king coveted Egyptian gold and Canaanite glass. The entire economic and political stability of the late Bronze Age rested on this delicate, far-flung web of maritime trade. The loss of this one ship was a local tragedy, but it gives us a global truth. It proves that globalization is not a modern invention, but a reality that existed over 3 millennia ago, where the fate of empires could literally sink or swim with the cargo of a single merchant vessel, forever changing our understanding of the ancient world's sophisticated and fragile connections. A different kind of treasure lay waiting in an unassuming English field, not in a royal ship but hidden in the common mud. In 2009, a man named Terry Herbert was metal detecting on a friend's farm in Staffordshire when his machine screamed with a signal. What he pulled from the soil was not a simple coin but a twisted piece of gold, intricately carved. That first piece was the key to a king's ransom. The subsequent archaeological excavation revealed the largest hoard of Anglo-Saxon gold and silver ever discovered, a staggering collection of over 4,000 items. But this was not a household treasure or a merchant's savings. Almost every single item was a piece of war. The hoard was a collection of the most valuable parts of a warrior's identity, stripped from their original weapons. There were ornate sword hilts inlaid with garnets and delicate filigree, golden pommel caps that crowned the ends of blades, and finely crafted cheek pieces from helmets that once guarded the faces of the elite. The sheer volume was overwhelming, a silent army's worth of refined violence. What is most striking is what was missing. There were no feminine brooches, no necklaces, no domestic silverware, no coins. This was not a family's buried wealth. It was a deliberate and exclusive collection of martial power. The hoard forces us to see Anglo-Saxon England through a new, harder lens. A king's power in this era was not just measured in land or subjects, but in the loyalty of his warriors, his retinue. Their value was literally embodied in the war gear he provided, these glittering, deadly status symbols. The Staffordshire Hoard is likely the loot from a major, forgotten battle, the spoils stripped from the defeated and gathered together. Was it buried for safekeeping by a victorious lord who never returned to claim his prize, or was it a votive offering, a sacrifice to the gods of war in thanks for a hard-won victory? The craftsmanship is breathtaking, surpassing even the splendors of Sutton, who, the goldsmiths employed a complex and aggressive style of art, intertwining fierce, stylized animals into patterns of mesmerizing complexity, all designed to glitter and intimidate on the battlefield. This was not just wealth, it was psychological warfare, a display of power meant to dazzle and demoralize an enemy before the first blow was even struck. The mud of Staffordshire did not just preserve gold, it preserved the stark reality of a society where power was wielded by a warrior elite, their authority forged in battle and symbolized by the breathtaking art they carried into the fray. A single finger bone, so small it seemed insignificant, was unearthed in the cold silence of a Siberian cave. To the naked eye, this fragment from Denisova cave held no remarkable features, no clues to its earth-shattering secret. It was only when scientists in a laboratory managed to extract and sequence its ancient DNA that the truth was revealed. This was not a bone from a Neanderthal, nor from one of our own Homo sapiens ancestors. It belonged to an entirely new branch on the human family tree, a lineage we now call the Denisovans. With that one genetic readout, the story of humanity was irrevocably rewritten. The simple, linear image of human evolution, a straight march from primitive ancestor to modern human, was shattered forever. We now knew that the world of the Pleistocene was a crowded, complex place, shared by at least 3 different kinds of humans. Homo sapiens were not alone. We shared the planet with the robust Neanderthals of Europe and Western Asia, and now with this elusive cousin, the Denisovans, who ranged across Asia. The plot thickened further. The DNA evidence revealed something astonishing. Our ancestors did not simply replace these other groups. They met them, they lived alongside them, and they had children with them. Interbreeding was not a rare exception. It was a part of our shared history. The legacy of these encounters is written in our own genes today. Significant chunks of Denisovan DNA persist in modern populations, particularly among people from Melanesia and Australia, where it makes up as much as 4 to 6% of some individuals' genetic code. This genetic inheritance is not just a historical footnote, it has real, physical consequences. Scientists believe that a gene variant inherited from Denisovans helps modern Tibetans and other high-altitude populations thrive in thin mountain air, a direct gift from an ancient cousin that allows survival in a harsh environment. The discovery of the Denisovans marked a fundamental shift in archaeology itself. The most profound revelations were no longer coming solely from the careful brush of a trowel, but from the sterile precision of a sequencing machine. It proved that the grand narrative of human origins could be unlocked not by a complete skeleton, but by a fragment of bone no larger than a pebble. This forces a humbling and thrilling question. If a single finger bone could introduce us to an entire lost branch of humanity, what other relatives, what other chapters of our own deep story are still hidden in the dust, waiting for the right tool to read their secrets? The cradle of civilization in the Americas was long believed to lie solely in the jungles of Mesoamerica. This entire narrative was upended by the discovery of a city that had been hiding in plain sight, its true nature masked by time and sand. In the arid Soup Valley of Peru, a complex of massive earthen mounds was once mistaken for natural hills. But when archaeologists began excavating Carroll in the 1990s, they realized these were not hills at all. They were the eroded remains of a vast metropolis, a city that thrived over 4,600 years ago. This date places Carroll's foundation around 2600 before Christ, making it the oldest known city in the Americas, a contemporary of the Great Pyramids at Giza. The scale of the site is breathtaking. 6 large pyramidal structures dominate the landscape, the largest standing 26 meters high. These are not simple piles of earth, but complex constructions with sunken circular plazas, grand staircases, and sophisticated stone-lined rooms. Surrounding these monumental cores are extensive residential districts, amphitheaters, and terraced fields, the layout of a planned urban center that supported a population of thousands. What makes Carroll so revolutionary and so puzzling is what its people did not have. This was a sophisticated society that flourished without 2 things we consider fundamental to early civilizations: pottery and visual art. We have found no painted pots, no carved statues, no intricate murals. Their genius expressed itself in other ways. They were master architects, constructing their pyramids with shikra bags, ingenious mesh sacks filled with stones that acted as anti-earthquake reinforcement, allowing the structures to flex and settle without collapsing. They were brilliant agricultural engineers, channeling water from the Soup River to irrigate fields of cotton, squash, and beans in the middle of a desert. And they were accomplished astronomers, aligning their main pyramid with a constellation of stars to mark the solstices and control their agricultural calendar. The entire city was a monument to sound. Among the most fascinating finds are a collection of musical instruments, including 32 flutes made from pelican and condor bones, intricately carved with animal figures. It seems the social and religious life of Carol was orchestrated through music, not imagery. This discovery forced a complete and total rewrite of the history books. Carol proved that the leap to large-scale urbanism and complex society happened in South America independently and just as early as it did in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. The Andes were not a secondary stage for civilization, receiving ideas from elsewhere. They were a primary hearth, a crucible where human ingenuity sparked its own unique flame. Carol stands in silent, monumental defiance of the old theory that all advanced culture diffused from a single source in the Old World. It is a powerful testament to the independent and ingenious spirit of humanity, proving that the drive to build a civilization can emerge anywhere under any conditions and follow a path entirely its own. A farmer's lost hammer led to a fortune beyond comprehension. Eric Laws was searching for it with his metal detector in a Suffolk field when the device screamed with a signal. Expecting to find the tool, he began to dig and instead struck metal. What he unearthed in 1992 was not a hammer, but a buried wooden chest, its contents spilling into the light after 15 centuries. This was the Hoxne Hoard, the largest collection of late Roman gold and silver ever discovered in Britain. The chest and smaller boxes contained a staggering array of wealth, over 15,000 gold and silver coins, exquisite gold jewelry including intricate necklaces and rings, and beautiful silver tableware like spoons and pepper pots. One particularly ornate silver vessel, a pepper pot in the form of a wealthy Roman noblewoman, speaks volumes about the refined tastes of its owner. This was not state treasure, but the private fortune of a single, incredibly wealthy family. The coins provided a crucial clue to the hoard's dramatic story, dating its burial to around 407 Anno Domini. This was a moment of profound crisis, the very end of Roman rule in Britain. With the legions withdrawn to the continent and Saxon raiders increasing their attacks, this family faced an impossible choice. They gathered their most valuable possessions, sealed them in a chest, and buried them for safekeeping, fully intending to return when the danger passed. They never did. This personal tragedy, a family losing everything in a collapsing world, became a historical miracle. The hoard forces us to completely rethink the final days of Roman Britain. This was not a sudden, catastrophic collapse into poverty and darkness. The sheer quality and quantity of this private wealth proves that even as the imperial administration crumbled, the province remained connected to the wider Roman economy, and its elite citizens lived lives of remarkable luxury and sophistication. The Hoxne Hoard is a time capsule from a world in transition, a glittering testament to the fact that history's grandest declines are built upon countless personal stories of loss, each one waiting in the earth to tell its tale. While the deserts of Egypt preserved their dry secrets, an entire city was slowly drowning in the Mediterranean mud. The great port of Thonis-Heracleion, a name found in the fragments of Herodotus and a few other ancient texts, was long considered a myth, a place of legend that had simply faded from the map. For over 1,000 years, its existence was debated, its location a mystery. Then, in the year 2000, a team led by underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio finally found it, not on land, but at the bottom of the sea near the Nile Delta. The first images from the murky depths were breathtaking. A colossal red granite statue of a pharaoh, over 5 meters tall, lay peacefully on the seabed, its stern face gazing up through the water. Nearby, the goddess Hapi, a symbol of the Nile's abundance, lay beside a giant stone head of the god Hapi, all preserved in a stunning state by the protective silt. This was not a scattered shipwreck, but an entire urban landscape frozen in time. They found the remains of grand temples with their columns toppled, gold coins and delicate jewelry, and dozens of ceremonial barges and trading ships, their hulls still resting in the thick clay that had swallowed them. Most importantly, they discovered a massive black granite slab, a stele inscribed with a royal decree. Its text explicitly named the city as Thonis-Heracleion, finally providing the physical proof that linked the legend to the reality. This city was the mandatory customs gateway for all Greek trade entering Egypt centuries before Alexander the Great founded Alexandria. Every ship, every merchant, every diplomatic envoy had to stop here to have their cargo inspected and taxes paid. The discovery forced historians to redraw the map of ancient commerce. It proved that the cultural and economic interplay between Egypt and Greece was not a later phenomenon, but a deep and established relationship centered on this bustling, cosmopolitan port. Thonis-Heracleion's dramatic disappearance, likely caused by a combination of earthquakes, soil liquefaction, and rising sea levels, shows how even a city of immense importance could be completely erased from the physical world, its memory kept alive only in whispers from a few ancient scrolls. Its rediscovery from the deep mud is a powerful reminder that our planet's geography is not fixed, and that other legendary ports mentioned in old texts may also be waiting just beneath the waves for their story to be told once more. Sometimes the greatest threat to scientific truth is not a lack of evidence, but a forgery that tells a story too perfect to question. In a gravel pit in Sussex, England, a team of amateur archaeologists announced a world-changing find in 1912. They had uncovered the fossilized remains of the missing link, a creature they called Piltdown Man. It possessed a large, human-like brain case, suggesting advanced intelligence, but its jaw was distinctly ape-like. This was exactly what many British scientists of the era had hoped to find, a fossil that placed the dawn of humanity right there in England, validating a deep-seated nationalistic pride. The scientific establishment, eager to claim this evolutionary trophy for Europe, embraced Piltdown Man with open arms. For 4 decades, it held a revered place in textbooks and museums, its contradictory features explained away because it fit a compelling narrative. The truth, when it finally emerged, was a brutal lesson in human fallibility. In the early 1950s, newly developed chemical tests, including fluorine dating, were applied to the bones. The results were unequivocal. The skull was a medieval human cranium, the jaw came from a modern orangutan, and both had been chemically stained to match the color of the gravel and carefully filed down to make the teeth appear worn. The entire specimen was a crude but cunning fraud, a Frankenstein's monster of bones assembled to deceive. The exposure of the Piltdown hoax sent a shockwave through the world of science. It was not merely an embarrassment, it was a fundamental crisis. How could so many brilliant minds have been fooled for so long? The answer lay in the powerful human desire for confirmation, the tendency to accept evidence that supports what we already wish was true. The hoax's long success was a testament to the danger of letting national pride and preconceived notions override rigorous, objective scrutiny. In the aftermath, the entire methodology of paleoanthropology was rewritten. The field instituted a new culture of extreme skepticism, mandating rigorous peer review and, most importantly, the immediate application of independent scientific testing to any new major discovery. No fossil would ever again be accepted on the authority of its finder or its appealing story alone. Piltdown Man, a fake that never existed, thus became one of history's most important discoveries. It did not rewrite the story of human evolution, but it fundamentally rewrote the rules of how that story must be verified, building a vital immune system against the viruses of bias and deception that can infect any search for truth. A bronze cloak pin discovered far from any known European shore became the key that unlocked a transatlantic mystery. For generations, the Icelandic sagas spoke of a daring voyage by Leif Erikson to a lush land west of Greenland, a place he named Vinland for the wild grapes that grew there. Historians treated these stories as epic poems, rich in symbolism but poor in geographical fact. That all changed in 1960 when a team led by Norwegian explorer Helge Ingstad and his wife, archaeologist Anne Stein Ingstad, followed a hunch to a remote fishing village at the very northern tip of Newfoundland. The local people pointed them toward a group of overgrown mounds that looked suspiciously unnatural. Excavations revealed the unmistakable outlines of Norse longhouses, their turf walls and stone fireplaces a perfect match for Viking-age structures found in Iceland and Greenland. This was Elant's Ox Meadows, and it was real. The settlement was small, likely home to no more than 100 people, but it was a functioning Norse base. They uncovered a forge for smithing iron, a simple stone anvil, and that single telling bronze pin, an object of pure Scandinavian design lying on Canadian soil. Radiocarbon dating placed the site squarely around the year 1000, a full 5 centuries before Christopher Columbus was even born. This was not a shipwreck or a temporary camp, but a deliberate, organized effort to establish a foothold in a new world. The discovery forced every textbook on exploration to be rewritten. Columbus was dethroned from his pedestal as the sole discoverer of the Americas. The Vikings had not only the daring to cross the treacherous North Atlantic in their iconic longships, but also the sophisticated navigational skill to make the journey repeatedly. Elant's Ox Meadows served as a gateway, a repair station and winter camp for expeditions venturing further south along the coast. The name Vinland, it seems, was not a myth. While wild grapes do not grow in northern Newfoundland, they thrive in the warmer climates of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, just a few hundred miles to the south. The Norse sagas, once dismissed as fiction, were now vindicated as a rough and ready guide to a new continent. This fleeting settlement, occupied for perhaps only a decade before being abandoned due to conflict with indigenous peoples the Norse called Skraelings, proves that the first European contact with the Americas was not a grand, colonizing fleet, but the tentative, fragile probing of Viking explorers. Their presence was brief, but their footprints, pressed into the peat of Newfoundland, forever changed the map of human history. A quiet lake in Sweden held a secret far darker than any Viking saga. At a site near Motala, archaeologists digging through the sediments of a dried-up prehistoric lakebed uncovered a scene that seemed to belong to a horror story. They found a collection of human skulls, but these were not simply buried. They had been mounted on wooden stakes and deliberately placed at the bottom of the lake 8,000 years ago. The most chilling detail was the method. For 2 of these individuals, a sharpened stake had been driven straight through the base of the skull, emerging from the crown in a gruesome display. This was the tomb of the sunken skulls, and it shattered the peaceful image of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers as simple, harmonious people living in balance with nature. Here was undeniable evidence of a ritual that felt utterly alien, a practice steeped in a worldview we can barely comprehend. Were these the skulls of enemies taken as trophies in violent conflicts between rival groups? Or were they revered ancestors, their remains curated and displayed in a watery shrine to appease spirits or forge a connection with the otherworld? The lake itself was not a random choice. In many ancient belief systems, bodies of water were seen as gateways to the divine, as places of sacrifice and spiritual transition. To place these skulls on stakes in the lake was to make a powerful statement, one that combined elements of terror, reverence, and ceremony. This single site forces a painful but necessary admission. We understand almost nothing about the inner spiritual lives of these early peoples. Their thoughts, their fears, and their beliefs about death and the afterlife are a closed book to us. The sunken skulls are a stark, physical reminder that the human capacity for complex and sometimes brutal ritual is not a product of civilization or agriculture. It is a fundamental part of our story, emerging from the deep past in ways that can still unsettle us today. It pushes us to ask what other profound and unsettling truths about our ancestors remain hidden in the earth, waiting to challenge the comfortable stories we tell ourselves about the dawn of humanity. The shifting sands of Arabia held a secret many believed was only a story. For centuries, the tales of Yuba drifted through the desert like a mirage, a city of unimaginable wealth built on the lucrative trade of frankincense. The Quran and ancient folklore spoke of its opulence and its dramatic fate, swallowed by the desert as divine punishment for the sins of its people. It was the Atlantis of the sands, a place most scholars dismissed as pure legend, a moral fable with no basis in reality. The challenge was the desert itself, a vast, trackless ocean of dunes that could erase a city without a trace. The search seemed hopeless, a quest for a phantom. Then, in the 1990s, a team led by Nicholas Clapp and Joris Zorens changed the game. They turned from camels and shovels to the eyes in the sky, using newly available satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar to scan the empty wastes of Oman. The technology revealed what the human eye could not see, ancient caravan tracks converging like ghostly threads on a single point in the desert. Following these digital footprints, they arrived at a site called Shissa. And there, the legend began to take solid form. Excavations uncovered the ruins of a heavily fortified city, its central feature a massive octagonal fortress. The city's end was as dramatic as the stories foretold. The fortress had not been worn down by time, but had catastrophically collapsed into a giant sinkhole, a cavern beneath the city giving way and dragging its heart into the earth. This was not a gradual abandonment, it was a sudden, violent consumption. The discovery provided a stunning historical reality to the figure of legend. Yuba was real. It was a critical hub on the frankincense trade route, a place where precious resin, worth its weight in gold, was gathered and shipped to the temples and palaces of the ancient world. This single find forced a complete reassessment of the Arabian Peninsula's role in history. It was not a peripheral wasteland, but the home of powerful, sophisticated kingdoms that controlled a global luxury economy, their wealth and influence flowing along these invisible desert paths. Yuba stands as a permanent monument to a new truth, that even the most ephemeral of legends can have a foundation in fact, and that the most powerful tools for uncovering the past are now a blend of ancient intuition and the silent, all-seeing gaze of modern technology. Her sword was a warrior's companion, buried beside her for the final journey. For over a century, archaeologists were certain the formidable individual resting in grave BJ 581 at Birka, Sweden, was a high-status man. The evidence seemed undeniable. This was no ordinary burial, but the tomb of a respected military leader, complete with a sword, a battle axe, spears, armor-piercing arrows, and 2 shields. Strategically placed gaming pieces lay nearby, hinting at a mind skilled in the planning of combat and tactics. Every single object spoke of a life dedicated to war, conforming perfectly to the Viking warrior ideal we have celebrated for generations. Then, in 2017, science spoke a different truth. A genomic analysis was conducted on the skeletal remains, and the result was unequivocal. The mighty warrior of Berka was biologically a woman. This single DNA readout shattered one of history's most stubborn stereotypes. We have long painted a picture of Viking society where men were the explorers, the raiders, the fighters, while women kept the home fires burning. The Berka warrior forces that simplistic division to collapse. Here was a woman who had not only borne arms, but had achieved a rank significant enough to warrant a burial with the full panoply of war, an honor previously thought to be an exclusively male privilege. This discovery does not necessarily mean there were armies of female Vikings, but it proves conclusively that the path to warrior status was not closed to women. It forces us to reread the Old Norse sagas with new eyes, to reconsider the tales of shield maidens not as mere mythic fantasies, but as echoes of a more complex social reality. The Berka woman stands as a powerful challenge, her silent bones louder than 1,000 epic poems, demanding we rewrite the story of the Viking Age to include the women who commanded, who strategized, and who fought alongside men, forever changing our understanding of gender and power in the ancient world. The quiet ruins of a medieval Georgian fortress held a secret far older than any stone wall. Beneath its foundations, in a layer of volcanic ash 1.8 million years old, archaeologists uncovered a collection of skulls that would shake the very roots of our family tree. These were the Denisovan hominins, and they were all found together, a small band of individuals who lived and died at the same time in the same place. On the surface, this sounds like a straightforward discovery, but the reality was anything but. The 5 skulls were astonishingly different from one another. One had a massive, robust jaw and a heavy brow ridge, while another was far more gracile with a smaller, more delicate face. The variation among them was as dramatic as the differences you might see walking through a crowd of modern humans today, or even as great as the distinctions paleoanthropologists used to define entirely separate species. This single site presented a gallery of human forms, all existing simultaneously. For decades, the story of early human evolution had been one of increasing complexity. In Africa, fossil finds had been sorted into a growing number of species, names like Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis, each with its own defined characteristics and place on a branching family tree. The Denisovan skulls threw a wrench into this tidy arrangement. How could such diverse individuals belong to the same small community if they represented different species? The most radical interpretation was that they did not. The evidence from Georgia suggested that all these early African forms might not be separate species at all, but rather were part of a single, wildly variable species, Homo erectus. This was a profound simplification of our origins. It argued that the physical diversity we see in the African fossil record is simply the natural range of variation within one adaptable, pioneering kind of human. The implications are staggering. It means that this one species, with a brain still smaller than ours but a body built for long-distance travel, was versatile enough to thrive in a vast range of environments. They were not different branches on the human tree, but different leaves on the same resilient branch. Denisovan forces us to confront a fundamental and humbling question. When we look at a handful of ancient bones, how can we truly know where the boundaries of a species lie? We are left to wonder if our own compulsion to categorize and label has, for over a century, created a complexity that never truly existed, obscuring the simple, powerful truth of a single, variable ancestor who first stepped out of Africa and into the wider world. A simple hammer found in Texas became a battleground over the nature of time itself. In 1936, a couple walking along a creek near London, Texas, noticed a curious piece of rock with what appeared to be a piece of wood sticking out of it. When they cracked the rock nodule open, they found a hammerhead nestled inside, a tool seemingly entombed within stone that dated from the Cretaceous period, a time when dinosaurs ruled the earth. This was the London hammer, an object that seemed to defy all logic. How could a man-made tool be encased in rock millions of years old? For those who champion it, the hammer is a smoking gun, definitive proof that advanced humans walked the earth alongside dinosaurs, or that a lost civilization possessed technology far earlier than we ever imagined. It is the quintessential out-of-place artifact, an OOP art, an object that appears too advanced for the layer in which it is found, a ghost from a future that should not exist in that ancient past. The allure of this narrative is powerful, a story that promises to shatter everything we thought we knew, but science offers a different, more grounded explanation. Geologists point to a natural process called concretion. The hammer, likely a miner's tool from the 1800s, was lost or discarded in a creek rich with dissolved minerals like limonite. Over time, these minerals can precipitate out of the water and harden around an object, forming a solid, stone-like shell that can look deceptively like the ancient bedrock itself. This process does not require millions of years. It can happen in a matter of centuries or even decades, creating a convincing but entirely natural illusion. The London hammer did not force historians to rewrite the story of the Cretaceous period, but it did force them to write a new chapter in the story of public engagement with science. This single, humble tool became a permanent fixture in the world of pseudoarchaeology, a case study that legitimate researchers must constantly address and debunk with patient, clear explanations about geological context and the scientific method. It serves as a crucial test not of our past but of our present. It challenges us to choose between the seductive simplicity of a sensational story and the more complex, often less dramatic, truths revealed by rigorous investigation. The hammer's true legacy is as a reminder that the most important discoveries are not always those that rewrite history, but those that reinforce the vital tools we use to separate fact from fantasy, ensuring that our journey into the past is built on the solid rock of evidence and not the shifting sand of a good story. The Nebra sky disk was almost lost to the black market forever. Looters armed with metal detectors found it on a German hilltop in 1999, illegally digging it from the earth alongside 2 precious swords and other bronze artifacts. It was a spectacular find, but for the wrong people. Thankfully, police and archaeologists set up a sting operation in a hotel in the Swiss city of Basel, arresting the looters and recovering the disc before it could vanish into a private collection. This bronze disc, inlaid with shimmering gold symbols, is small enough to hold in your hands, yet it contains a universe of meaning. Dating to around 1600 before Christ, it is now recognized as the world's oldest known concrete depiction of the cosmos. The symbol seems simple at first glance: a golden crescent moon, a large full circle that could be a full moon or perhaps the sun, and a scattering of stars. One cluster of 7 stars is almost certainly the Pleiades, a star group that has captivated humanity across countless cultures. But the story of the disk is written in its very metal. Scientific analysis revealed it was not made all at once. Over time, 2 golden arcs were added along the sides, and later, another arc at the bottom, often interpreted as a solar bark, a mythical boat that carried the sun through the underworld at night. Those side arcs are the true stroke of genius. They precisely mark the angle between the solstice sunrises and sunsets as seen from that specific hill in central Germany. This transformed the disk from a beautiful star chart into a sophisticated, portable astronomical instrument. It was a working luni-solar calendar, a device that harmonized the cycles of the moon with the longer solar year, allowing its creators to predict the changing seasons with remarkable accuracy. This single object shattered the old narrative of Central Europe's early Bronze Age unearthed culture. Historians had long considered these peoples to be technologically capable but culturally simple, a far cry from the magnificent, centralized civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Nebra sky disk screams a different truth. Here was a society with its own class of astronomer priests, individuals who could track complex celestial movements over generations and encode that knowledge into a durable, symbolic object. They were not barbarians living in the shadow of the Mediterranean. They were intellectual peers, independently developing a deep, practical understanding of the cosmos that governed their agriculture, their rituals, and their very view of humanity's place in the universe. The disk forces us to redraw the map of early science, proving that the drive to decode the heavens was a universal human impulse, one that could ignite with brilliant clarity under the wide skies of prehistoric Germany. The dirt of Shanidar Cave in Iraq held bones that told a story of survival against impossible odds. Between 1957 and 1961, archaeologist Ralph Solke and his team uncovered the skeletons of several Neanderthals, but these were not the remains of a healthy, robust species. One man had been blind in one eye, his arm was withered and amputated, and one of his feet was crippled. Yet his bones showed he had lived for years with these profound disabilities. He could not have hunted or easily defended himself. His survival was a quiet testament to one thing: his people had cared for him. They had shared food, offered protection, and ensured he was not left behind. This alone was a revelation, but it was another discovery in the same cave that would truly shatter the old myth. A skeleton designated Shanidar IV was found surrounded by something utterly unexpected: dense clusters of pollen from brightly colored flowers like hollyhocks and cornflowers. This was not a random accident. The pollen was concentrated around the body, suggesting the individual had been deliberately laid to rest on a soft bed of freshly picked blossoms. The image this conjures is hauntingly beautiful and deeply human. It was not a practical act, but a symbolic one, a ritual of mourning that spoke of loss, memory, and perhaps a belief in something beyond the harsh realities of a prehistoric world. This flower burial forced a complete and dramatic rewrite of the Neanderthal story. For over a century, they had been caricatured as grunting, stooped brutes, a lesser branch on the human tree that we simply replaced. Shanidar Cave screamed a different truth. Here was evidence of compassion, of empathy, of a social fabric strong enough to support its most vulnerable members and to honor its dead with something as tender as a bouquet of wildflowers. The capacity for such complex emotion and symbolic thought was no longer a quality that set us apart. It was a shared inheritance, a profound link with our closest extinct relatives. The Neanderthals of Shanidar were not primitive beasts. They were a people who felt grief, who practiced care, and who looked at a field of flowers and saw not just food, but a final gift for someone they had loved. The line between epic poetry and historical fact was once considered absolute and unyielding. For centuries, scholars dismissed the city of Troy and its legendary war as a beautiful fiction, a tale spun by Homer to explore themes of honor, love, and wrath. The very idea that a Bronze Age conflict over a queen named Helen could have a basis in reality was deemed the stuff of fantasy. That rigid boundary was demolished by a man of immense wealth and unshakable conviction, the German businessman Heinrich Schliemann. He was not a trained archaeologist, but he possessed a powerful tool that the academics of his day scorned: a literal belief in the geography of Homer's Iliad. Convinced the epic was a historical guidebook, he set his sights on a large mound in Hisarlik, Turkey. Local tradition and his own reading of the text pointed him there, and he began to dig with a passion that was as destructive as it was determined. His methods were brutally crude by today's standards, using teams of workers to carve great trenches through the ancient earth, undoubtedly obliterating countless layers of history in his single-minded quest. Yet his relentless drive yielded an astonishing revelation. He did not find one city but many, a layered cake of civilizations built directly on top of one another over thousands of years. One of these layers, now known as Troy 7A, bore the unmistakable scars of a catastrophic end. Its walls were shattered, and the ground was blackened by a massive, city-wide fire dating to around 1180 before Christ, a date that aligns perfectly with the traditional timeline for the Trojan War. Schliemann's most famous and problematic moment came when he uncovered a glittering hoard of gold jewelry and artifacts, which he dramatically declared to be Priam's treasure, the wealth of the Homeric king. While his identification was almost certainly wrong, and his handling of the find reckless, the core of his discovery was monumental. He had proven that a major, powerful Bronze Age city stood exactly where Homer said Troy should be. This was not just a village, but a fortified citadel controlling the vital sea lanes between the Aegean and the Black Sea, a prize worth fighting for. The discovery forced a profound shift in historical thinking. It demonstrated that the grand oral traditions and myths passed down through generations were not merely inventions. They could be the poetic echoes of real events, of actual cities and conflicts that were remembered, amplified, and transformed into legend over centuries. The story of a war over Helen may be a poetic embellishment, but the story of a war over Troy itself suddenly became a historical possibility. The dust of Hisarlik did more than just reveal an ancient citadel. It blurred the line forever between legend and archaeology, challenging us to listen more carefully to the oldest stories we tell, for they may just be waiting for a shovel to prove they were true all along. These discoveries are not merely footnotes for scholars. They are pebbles tossed into the pond of our collective memory, each one sending out ripples that change how we see ourselves. Every time a new artifact emerges from the earth, it forces a quiet but profound shift in our understanding of human ingenuity, resilience, and our deep, ancient connections to one another. The true lesson these finds teach us is not a list of new facts, but a posture of humility. They demonstrate with startling clarity that our current knowledge is always provisional, always waiting for the next turn of a spade to reveal a truth we never saw coming. This process relentlessly dismantles the nationalistic and simplistic stories we often tell ourselves about the past. There are no pure, isolated cultures in this new history. Instead, we see a world that has always been shared, complex, and wonderfully diverse, a tapestry woven from countless threads of trade, migration, and shared ideas. History is not a closed book written by the victors and handed down for us to memorize. It is an ongoing, global detective story. New evidence has the power to restore the voices of those who were marginalized, to correct the boastful accounts of conquerors, and to reveal entire lost chapters of our common human journey. This continual rediscovery does more than just update textbooks. It keeps the past alive and urgently relevant, a constant reminder that we are not at the end of this story, but active participants in a narrative that is still being written, with every discovery offering a new chance to understand who we are and how we came to be. This journey through 30 remarkable discoveries reveals a common thread, a truth that echoes from every shattered assumption. Our past is far more dynamic, interconnected, and surprising than any single story could ever contain. We have seen the sophisticated computers of the ancient Greeks and the transatlantic voyages of the Vikings, proving that genius and daring are not confined to any one era. We have met compassionate Neanderthals who cared for their sick and buried their dead with flowers, and we have stood in awe of monumental temples built by hunter-gatherers who felt the sacred call to build the impossible long before they settled into farming. These finds are so much more than inert artifacts sitting in museum cases. They are active keys, each one unlocking a forgotten world and directly challenging our most deeply held assumptions about progress, intelligence, and human nature. They transform history from a static record, a list of dates and dead kings, into a living, breathing dialogue. It is a constant conversation between our present questions and the answers the past has been patiently holding for us, just waiting for the right moment to speak. Let this exploration be more than just a list of facts. Let it be an inspiration to look at the world around you with a truly curious and questioning eye. The ground you walk on, the landscape you see every day, it is all a palimpsest, a manuscript written over many times. The next great discovery that will fundamentally rewrite our history books could be hidden in a local creek, waiting in a farmer's field, or even just beneath your feet. If you found this journey through rewritten history fascinating, we have many more deep dives into the past waiting for you. Subscribe to continue exploring, and we would love to hear your thoughts on which of these 30 discoveries surprised you the most in the comments.